You have to see storytelling from an influencer point of view to tell the stories of the things you want to highlight that are going to connect with your customers. The customer has to come first.
Welcome to the Agents of Change podcast, the podcast for today's digital marketer, with your host, Rich Brooks, and the Agents of Change, search, social, and mobile.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 243 of the Agents of Change podcast. I'm your host, Rich Brooks, and this episode is brought to you by Flight New Media. Now, I met Angus at this year's Social Media Marketing World Conference and liked him immediately. I knew that I wanted to have him on the podcast, but I wasn't quite sure what we were going to talk about. As it turned out, Angus and Life of Dad are masters in influencer marketing, both in terms of finding influencers for different brands, as well as Angus being an influencer himself. If you've wondered about how you might get an influencer to talk about your brand to his or her audience, or maybe you've wondered if you have what it takes to get brands to come to you because of your audience and your influence, you're going to love the chat that Angus and I have. Just remember that if you're not on the Agents of Change email list, but you want access to our very limited supply of early bird tickets for this year's Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference on September 20th and the workshops that we're doing on September 21st, you want to take advantage of that. So head on over to theagentsofchange.com, and probably the easiest way, simplest way to sign up is at the bottom of every page. There's a little sticky footer. You can sign up for updates, and if you're on that list, then you will get early notice for the early bird tickets, and you can save 50% off your tickets. There's a very limited amount, so make sure you get on that list. Now, let's go check out that conversation I had with Angus Nelson now. Today's guest is the president of Life of Dad, an influencer marketing agency doing branded content for large brands. Consultant and speaker for Fortune. By the way, did an angel just get her wings? I just heard a ping.
Yeah.
Is that only in my head?
I have it turned off too, so I don't know why it's still chiming.
No, that's awesome. I'm totally keeping this, by the way. I'm just gonna have to say the whole thing again, but I love the chime. Here we go. Today's guest is president of Life of Dad, an influencer marketing agency doing branded content for large brands. He's a consultant and speaker for Fortune 1000 brands, including Walmart, Whole Foods, and Coca-Cola. He's the host of an Inc.com top 20 business podcast called Up in Your Business. And his book, Empowering Work, releases fall of 2018. I am very excited to welcome to Agents of Change, Angus Nelson.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We were just talking about our respective cities before we jumped on the line. You were in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a beautiful
Music
city.
City, USA. You got it.
And I'm up here in Portland, Maine, and I was not exactly complaining about the weather, but certainly we're having different weather patterns right now.
Yeah, I stepped outside today, and it's actually warm. It's gorgeous out. I don't even need a coat.
Yeah, it's nice up here, too. It's like 36. So
and snowy.
Not snowy today. We're expecting our fourth storm, but not snowy today. So let's talk a little bit. Let's start by talking about Life of Dad. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this is and maybe what your role there is?
Sure. So Life of Dad is two parts. One is a community. And on the community side, we have a Facebook group of about 1.7 million people. Started about 8 years ago. Our founder, Tom Riles, had a child, and at 3 days of age, she had a congenital heart issue and needed open heart surgery. Tom started a blog to kind of tell the story for his family and friends. And as he would write the story, more people started paying attention, and it started growing from there. So over the 8 years, two things happened. One is this community built. And then the second part of the company, we started doing branded content because we started meeting all these other like dad influencers in the space. And back then it was more blogs and the editorial side. So we had dad bloggers, but now that's obviously transcended into video and Instagram and YouTube, et cetera. And so those are the two sides that make up all of Life of Dad. And our whole cause is that we want to further this movement of fatherhood to get dads to show up.
And so what do you do? Which is very cool, by the way. I love the whole dad thing, obviously. I'm the father of two beautiful daughters. Or I should say not beautiful, they are in my mind, but smart, intelligent, funny daughters. I think that's even more important.
Yeah.
So what is your role? What are you doing for Life of Dad?
So I'm the president, so buck stops with me, for better or worse. So I help manage the agency side of the organization. So all that branded content that I shared, I manage our project managers and our contracts that we do with all of those companies, a little bit of biz dev, and speaking on behalf at different conferences where you and I have met at Social Media Marketing World.
Absolutely.
And yeah, what most people know about us is, from our branded content side, is the Cheerio challenge that we did last year. It went viral, where we challenged dads to stack Cheerios on their sleeping babies. It went crazy. Soon we had Macklemore doing it, and Reese Witherspoon, and then even President Obama was stacking Cheerios. And so we won a Silver Lion Award for that. And we've just been building off the momentum, working with a lot of great brands and creating awesome content that's, it's focused on dads and fatherhood. So it's a little cheeky, it's a little irreverent, it's a little off the mark, because for dads, it's got to be fun. And so that's what we do with Life of Dad.
Sounds very cool. So you mentioned influencer marketing when you were kind of describing what's going on over at Life of Dad. Influencer marketing is one of those phrases that just seems to be bandied around quite a bit these days, and everybody's saying that they're an influencer marketer or they're an expert in it. Like, what exactly, in your words, is influencer marketing, and how are you using it over at Life of Dad? And maybe just as a follow-up to that, because Life of Dad is not a typical small business, how could a typical small business use influencer marketing? So again, those three questions, I should have asked them one at a time, are,
oh my goodness,
are you taking notes? You better be taking notes over there. What is influencer marketing, in your opinion? How are you using it at Life of Dad? And how can a typical small to medium-sized business use it? Go.
Sure. Right. Okay. Tag. I'm in. So influencer marketing is the leveraging of people who have an authentic, there's our chime.
I feel like two angels have gotten their wings. I think this is great. So don't even worry about it.
So the essence of influencer marketing is leveraging people who have built an authentic voice, an audience around the things that they do. Typically, an influencer has two kinds of audiences. They have someone who loves what they do and how they do it, or the second part of that is they want to be them. That audience member wants to be whatever that influencer is doing. And they've taken the time to invest around a cause, around an interest, around a hobby. And so an influencer, traditionally in our world, is someone who is more on what would be called the micro or the nano. Most people know influencers as, the major people who are like celebrities. These are the Kardashians. These are the LeBron James. Like those kind of contracts and sponsorships, yes, those definitely have influence. The problem is the trust factor and authenticity of their kinds of endorsements are a little bit less powerful than when you start working with the kinds of people that we work with, where our audiences are typically 100,000 followers or less. And if you get on the nano level, it's a little debatable, but somewhere around 10,000. Because when those voices are heard, the authenticity is a lot more trusted. They're not somebody who is necessarily making their millions off of this, that, and the other. It's someone who's just trying to get along just like everyone else. In addition, as these influencers start to grow, there's this shared journey. You're following along as this person you're following that becomes more quote unquote successful or well known. You can say, man, I was following them back when. So that's kind of how I translate that. For us particularly, we have about 350 plus influencers that we work with, all focused on fatherhood and families. Some of my favorites right now are our guys who are the young millennial YouTubers. They're just kicking out incredible videos that are funny, and they've been using jump cut techniques on YouTube to tell these stories that are really tight and move very quickly, so you engage very easily. But in addition, they're telling these stories that are like where everybody else is at. It's like something you can immediately identify with as a father or, as a parent. So those are kind of the elements that we take into the kind of marketing that we do for a brand. Is we have two philosophies that I try and think of in my mind. One is we don't try to interrupt people's lives. We try to intersect their lives. So when we tell a brand message, say brand X comes to us, I don't want to just talk about brand X. I want to talk about brand X from a very authentic story of where it plays a role in my life, why it's important to me, but more importantly, why it's important to my audience. And so I'm going to tell a story that instead of interrupting them and kind of like catching their attention and stopping them, I'm more inclined to come alongside them and intersect and say, hey, I'm pretty sure you kind of deal with these same issues too, which takes me to the second component is I want the audience to say, me too. When I see that, I want to say, oh my gosh, I totally experienced the same thing. Oh my gosh, that's me too. So those are two elements of our storytelling and our marketing that we create through our influence marketing networks for brands. And then the last piece of your question.
Wait, before we get to that, I just want to kind of clarify. So Life of Dad, when you're working with influencers, you're almost, and I don't mean this to be dismissive at all, but you're like a middleman. You're helping brands identify or connect with people who are these micro or even nano influencers. Is that an accurate way of describing what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So, and there's actually two nuances to that. One is we're the agency on behalf of the brand to the influencers, for sure. And then we ourselves are an influencer. We have our website, we have our YouTube channel, and our Facebook, etc. So with our 1.7 million inside of that, in addition, we have like different groups, single dads, divorced dads, dads with kids with special needs. And we embrace a really powerful community and engage on, a very real, I'm going to use the word vulnerable and transparent context. So, for instance, when Facebook decides to change their algorithms, one of the things that we kind of have as a leg up is the fact that our content is so engaging that we haven't experienced as much hit on our algorithms. And so we've built a lot of trust in light of that. So we become an influencer. And the flip side of that is we also protect our audience as much as possible. Even though we do branded content, we make sure that we're not like completely becoming brand whores where that's all we do.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
It's always a little bit.
Do you want to go to the third part? It is. It absolutely is.
Yeah, well, I guess just a little bit more on this. So, like, if I felt my business needed to get in front of an audience and it was around single dads or whatever it might be, that you would help me connect with this person, then obviously there's some sort of financial investment in this type of influencer marketing, as there is in most influencer marketing. And then we would negotiate a deal, so to speak, where this person might use our brand in their videos in this case, or might talk about it, in terms of what they're doing, or maybe, our product would just show up in their videos. What is the nuance there? It's just not an area I'm especially familiar with.
Sure, I'll give you kind of an example. So, for instance, we did a campaign with Canon copiers. We brought in about 60 influencers. Canon sent them each a Canon printer. We had two different kinds of printers. There was a more traditional printer with a cartridge of ink, and then there was another printer that some of the guys got that actually has a bottle of ink. We built an entire creative concept for Canon on their behalf and created what we call a playbook. And that is a deck that gives kind of the parameters of how a campaign will be launched. It gives all the key messaging. It gives a storyline that we're looking for, the hashtag, all the links, and then where to put all the content, FTC regulations, blah, blah, blah. So it's all in this one deck. That's the playbook. Inside of that, the creative that we conceptualized was this thought: what if a printer was such an important part of your family that it was almost like another member? It was another kid. What if it was #printbaby? We've got 60 dads who are treating their copiers as if it was a baby. So you've got guys who are pushing strollers and telling you stories about going to the park and on the swing set and going down slides, We've got guys who are using their printers to print out pictures of their kids and fill in the frames and creating this whole, family environment. We have guys who are carrying printers strapped to their chest.
Piling Cheerios on their printers, perhaps.
Well, then we get a little cross promotion, yeah?
There you go.
That's hilarious. So that became 97 million impressions that we created for Canon because it was such a bizarre, crazy thought that the Canon marketing team, they literally laughed out loud and they said, we would have never come up with anything like that. And so bringing something that unique to the table, now, again, this is, a little bit on the slight of ridiculous, but we thought it was very appropriate for that brand. And it was really successful.
Nice. So let's bring it to the listener, this person at home who's listening. They run a small business or they're marketing for a small business. Where does influencer marketing fit into their game plan? How might they use it?
Sure. So I'm going to give you two concepts. One is you are an influencer, so start marketing one. And what that means is start seeing your brand as something that does exactly what I just said. Find ways to intersect your customer's life instead of interrupt. So many times as marketers, we become so fixated on who we are and what we do. We're staring at our navels and we're the ultimate narcissist. I've got this great sale. It's amazing. You're going to love it. Nobody gives a rat's about your sale unless you can frame it in a way that's going to change their life. An influencer will tell a story about one of their customers that came in who had a need and how your company was able to provide a service or a product that transformed their life experience, something that affected or impacted a meal that they were preparing, something that changed the way their car ran or what the car was capable of doing on behalf of it getting fixed. You have to see storytelling from an influencer point of view to tell the stories of the things you want to highlight that are going to connect with your customers. The customer has to come first. The second component of that is you have some customers who are your hero customers. They're amazing. They love everything you do, anything you put out, they're going to buy. They talk about you on social media. They post pictures every time they come. Those are the very customers that now you have to treat as your influencers. And what are ways that you can offer them additional products, additional experiences, additional things that they can talk about on behalf of your company, and now they become your advocates. It's amazing what people will do when they get, something that goes above and beyond the expected. For me and my family, we actually are influencers ourselves. We have a side hustle, which is our family travel blog called Those Crazy Nelsons. And one of the brands that we've partnered with is General Mills. Out of the blue, I will get a box that we treat like Christmas morning every time we get one. And you never know what's going to be in there. During the summer months last year, it had like a little picnic experience. It had a little basket and it had some cups and then it had a box of cereal that you can't buy off the shelf. It was a very unique product. Over Christmas time, they sent us a box of checks with a bag of chocolate chips, one of powdered sugar, and one of peanut, a little canister of organic peanut butter. And then in addition, inside the box, they had these little baggies and an instructional sheet and gift box. And the whole ask that they made was, this is how you can do something nice for your neighbors. You're going to turn all of this into puppy chow, which if you're not familiar with it, you mix the checks with the peanut butter and the chocolate and the powdered sugar. You put it in this little gift bag and hand it out to your neighbors. And it was amazing. Of course, we told stories about that. What can you do with your product, your service, your brand that is completely unexpected with the hero customers that participate with what you do?
So I kind of get how to engage our super fans. I mean, I've definitely seen people over the years who just took a real liking to Flight New Media or Agents of Change, or even more bizarrely myself. And I'll be honest, I sometimes have kept them at arm's length because I didn't know what to do with them. And what I'm hearing from you is I shouldn't have been keeping them at arm's length. What I should have been doing is embracing them and rewarding them for that kind of loyalty and trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that seems pretty obvious to me now that you've pointed out the obvious to me, and I can work on that. But I'm more interested in this whole you are an influencer. Like, how exactly, I mean, do I market myself or my brand as an influencer? And I'm kind of curious, does that tie into you getting free stuff from General Mills?
So, I mean, that could be a whole nother partnership in and of itself, depending on what your brand or product is. But my philosophy here is thinking like an influencer. If you were to like create some campaign for a holiday that's coming up, instead of thinking it from just a discount code or a buy one get one free, what if instead you thought about your customer? What is it about this holiday that your brand or service can intersect their experience over that holiday? So thinking like an influencer will help your marketing become more authentic and more contagious than you just bragging about yourself. It's like going to that cocktail party and you meet that one dude who all they do is talk about who they are, what they do, and like, oh, and I did this and I did this. And you like never get a word in edgewise. Like that's what most brands do. They just talk about themselves. And then when they do a testimonial, it's one of these like canned, I did this new tires. That's awesome. And it's like, but where's the story? Ironically, some of the most annoying commercials are those insurance, life injury, body injury type of thing. And they go, talk to somebody and they tell this story about how they were in an accident and this attorney came in and paid these bills and took care of this. And on one hand, you can say it's really kind of awkward and it's never really nicely produced. But guess what? Those companies are making money because they're telling a story about where they're intersecting someone's life. And in a time of crisis, that makes sense. And so they tell these obnoxious stories over and over and over again. What is a more authentic way that you can tell yours?
All right, that's a pretty good takeaway. I do have kind of, I don't want to throw a fly in the ointment, but over the past few weeks, I've seen a couple stories in the New York Times, and I'm wondering how this might impact influencer marketing. And maybe you already know what I'm going to talk about, but the New York Times has had a couple of articles about especially Twitter and Instagram and the number of influencers who have fake accounts following them and fake accounts engaging them and just how easy it is to buy fake accounts. Do you see that this is something that might hurt influencer marketing, or is this just something that if we are looking to connect with influencers, we should just be a little bit more careful about?
Yeah, I think it's the best thing ever. When influencer marketing kind of came into the limelight, it was a lot like social media. People said, oh, well, what does that have to do with anything? Social media, it doesn't have anything to do with my company. And then when people said, oh, well, maybe it does. And then everything people did was a crapshoot. And they didn't know what was the return on investment. Like, is this making a difference? Is it bringing people into my store? Is it selling products? And at first, we didn't have a lot of measurables. But as time has gone on, technology has changed and people have been able to dig into the data and create tools that could measure the success of a campaign. In the same fashion, now influencer marketing has developed tools to be able to measure engagement, to be able to measure true growth. And those tools are now proving who are the frauds that purchased their followers, or even those who didn't go and purchase their followers. Maybe they built it authentically, but maybe now they've become only about brands, and that's the only content they create. Their engagement has nosedived, and nobody's listening anymore. And every time they post something, it's just crickets. We can now measure that using software tools, and we know of our influencers which ones of them are no longer effective. we're actually in the process right now of having hard conversations with some of our influencers because everything I just told you, that's describing of them. And they have to make a choice. Either you shape up and you start letting your voice be heard again and rebuild the engagement and authenticity, or we're going to have to part ways. And so I think these conversations are actually super helpful. They're actually going to strengthen the space because now the people who are involved are going to be the real deal.
Makes sense. It's almost like when you grow the same crops on the same piece of land over and over again, after a while, you can't grow crops on that land and you have to let that land sit for a little while. It may be that these people just over harvested their own influence for a while.
Mm-hmm. And related to that also is because we started 8 years ago, a lot of our quote unquote influencers were editorial. They were bloggers because that was more of the thing. And now the trends are moving towards a visual experience. So Instagram and YouTube, the video side of it is becoming far more powerful. Some of our stalwarts in the space that were editorial, either by, admission or omission, have not transferred into this new space. They're going to get lost in the shuffle if they, either can't keep engaging with SEO, driving people to the traffic through editorial, or learning how to create great visuals. And so some of our guys are having to learn very quickly that times are changing and you have to change with them or you're going to get left behind.
So in the last minute or so, I just have a question. Do you have advice for people who maybe have built up an audience? They've got something interesting. They're sharing stuff. They've never really maybe monetized it or haven't been able to figure out. Is there a place that people can go to say, hey, I'm an influencer. I've got an audience of this size. I speak to this type of person. What are the brands that might buy into me?
So I would tell you there's a couple different ways you can go out doing it. One is you want to be able to tell your story. So create just a one sheet. If you're not familiar with that, you can simply Google it and go to the images and you'll actually see samples of what other influencers have created. It's basically going to be an image of you, a little bit of a nugget about your brand. And just to help you with that, I always tell our influencers, make it a value statement that says, I am X that does Y for Z so that they can, and then insert your superpower. You always want to have a niche. You can't just say I'm an influencer. What are you an influencer of? Oh, I'm an influencer of fashion. Okay, so what kind of fashion? Dive down one notch deeper. Oh, I'm men's fashion for, I don't know.
Vegans, for vegan men.
Or vegans, there you go. Whatever that might be. So you have that, and then you have your numbers, and then you have some of the things that you've done with some links to some examples. That's number one. Number two is you can go to a number of different websites where you can enter in and become another cog in their wheel, like Tap Influence, IZEA. If you start doing Google searches, you'll see there's a whole lot of other kind of places that you post your name and you register. Usually it's for free. And then they will let you know when campaigns are up and then you can put your hat in the ring. The problem with that is it's super competitive and there's lots of people involved. So that takes me to the third piece. Like anything, it doesn't come easy. You're going to have to do some outreach. Jump onto LinkedIn, find out who some of the social media managers are for some of the brands you want to work with. 2, talk about the brands you want to work with. And if you tag them in some of your content now, even before you're paid, even before you're talking about it, you do it in an authentic way, and then reach out to that brand, this manager of the social, and say, hey, look, I did this post on this particular piece in your product line. Here's the results I got. Man, I'd love to do some more of that. What do you think about partnering on your next product? And you open a door of conversation. The best kind of influencer marketing is not a one-shot deal. The best positioning of influencer marketing is an ongoing relationship. Just like I gave the example of General Mills, working with those crazy Nelsons, you have an ongoing advocacy of people who know, love, like, trust your brand. They're speaking more authentically because of what they're experiencing, and they'll talk about you even when you're not paying them to talk about you. They run into a friend, they start talking about cereal and like, oh my gosh, I was just telling them about these Lucky Charms. They're amazing, made by General Mills, and it's whole grain, and it's amazing. Or when something goes wrong and you have bad PR that goes out, those are the advocates who jump onto their channels and then go and defend the cause and say, well, I don't think you understand. I've worked with General Mills for X amount of time, and they're really great at what they do. I think this might be a one-off bad experience. Maybe you should give them another try. Those are elements of influencer marketing that people don't see the big picture of what's possible.
Nice. That's some good advice. So I'm sure that a lot of people are intrigued. They want to learn more. They want to learn more about you, Life of Dad, maybe some influencer marketing. Where can we find you online?
If you're interested in learning more about the influencer marketing side of what we do at Life of Dad, you can simply go to agency.lifeofdad.com, and you can see kind of the highlights of what we do. And if you want to get a hold of me, you can email me, angus@lifeofdad.com. If you just want to learn more about the influencer marketing space and you want to ask me some questions, feel free to use that email address. I can speak at your event, or I can consult for you. I'm always happy to serve. So feel free to reach out.
Angus, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Rich. Thank you.
If you're listening to the AOC podcast for the first time, you may not know that we have a full transcript for every single episode, but it's true. You can just head on over to theagentsofchange.com/243, and you'll see the full transcript of my conversation with Angus, as well with every link that he shared with us, and a whole bunch of other goodies. So make sure you head on over there. And while you're there, make sure that you sign up for the email newsletter so that you can get alerts if you're interested in attending our Agents of Change Digital Marketing Conference. This will be the 7th annual conference that we're hosting for AOC. It is on September 20th. There's a day of workshops on the 21st, and something special I'm working on right now for the 22nd, which hopefully I'll have more to say about shortly. But you definitely want to go to the site and check out all of those things and sign up for our email newsletter. Remember if you didn't know this, remember if you did know this, and here's something new if you didn't know this, that it's not just a physical conference that takes place in Portland, Maine. It's also a virtual conference that you can attend live stream or on demand. So you definitely want to make sure you're on the list, even if you have no ability or no intention of coming to Portland, Maine on September 20th. September is the most beautiful time of the year in Maine, but maybe you just can't make it. For budget or conflict or whatever other reasons, you can still attend the conference live or on demand. So head on over to theagentsofchange.com, sign up for the email newsletter now. That's all the content that we have for this week. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe to the show. It's free. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app. Talk to you again in 7.
Tune in next week when we continue our battle to subdue search, solve social media, and master mobile marketing.